Welcome to the Deep Dive. Okay, today we are plugging you directly into a sound system that, honestly, it basically defined a whole era down south. We are getting into the absolute trunk-rattling core of South Florida bass music. And yeah, let's get this right up front. It's pronounced bass, B-A-S-S, but said like bass. This wasn't just music, it was like a physical force.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changed what people thought car audio could even do. Our mission, really, is to trace back where that seismic vibration came from. And specifically, we're looking at this tension, this historical friction between the street-level pioneers who kind of sketched out the blueprint, and then the entrepreneurs who took that blueprint and built this huge national thing out of Miami.
And we've got some great sources to pull from here. Timelines, deep dives into the key players like Jam Pony Express, Luther Campbell, Uncle Luke, obviously, and interviews with producers.
With business analyses, too, looking at how the whole scene operated, the regional stuff.
Right. So the big question we're trying to unpack from all this material, and it's relevant whether you're into music or business, when you really follow the DNA of those, like, ground-shaking beats, who gets the credit? Is it the architects, the guys doing it first underground?
Yeah.
Or is it the ones who built the empire who made it last commercially?
That's the core of it. Where does that legacy truly sit?
Okay, so let's start at the absolute bedrock. The technological heart of this whole sound. You can't talk bass without talking about one specific piece of gear, the Roland TR-808 drum machine.
The legendary 808. And it's funny, it was almost a footnote in synth history before bass music basically resurrected it. It's famous for that really deep, sustained bass kick, but also those snappy, high-tempo beats that drove the track.
But the electronic vibe of it, that goes back further, right? Like, not even Florida, not even the U.S.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the lineage.
Yeah.
Our sources trace that electronic sound signature way back to Germany, actually, to Kraftwerk.
Kraftwerk, right? Albums like Computer World, Trans-Europe Express. It's kind of wild that this super southern heavy party sound has roots in German electronic precision.
It is. And, early hip-hop was the bridge. Africa, Bombata, Planet Rock that definitely used the 808 sound and brought it into that cultural space. Yeah. But the bass pioneers in Florida, they did something different with it, critically different. See, early electro guys, they tended to keep the 808 kick tight, punchy, like a sharp hit.
Okay, so not the rumble we associate with bass. How did they get that sound? What did the Florida producers figure out?
It was almost ridiculously simple, technically speaking, but revolutionary in effect. They figured out that if you messed with the kick drum knob, on the 808 specifically, the decay knob.
Decay, meaning how long the sound lasts.
Exactly, how long it rings out. By turning that decay up, way up, that quick percussive thump turned into this long, drawn-out vibration, a rumble. That's it. That's how they got that signature boom. The sound that literally shook car trunks apart. That was the technical term.
Man. Okay, here's where the story gets really interesting geographically, because the thing we know nationally as Miami bass, well, the argument is it really started like 4 miles north, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. We have to talk about the crew who really laid down that initial template. Jam Pony Express, the DJs.
Jam Pony Express, yeah. They were active in Fort Lauderdale around 81, 82. And that timeline is super important because it puts them firmly ahead of the curve. They were crafting the sound, the style, the whole aesthetic before any big records broke out of Miami. They were these mobile DJ crews, famous for what they call the party mic style.
That's the hype, right? The constant chatter over the beat.
Totally. Non-stop call and response, hyping the crowd, talking over the instrumentals, making it feel live, interactive, and that signature vocal drop.
Yeah, you heard that. You knew who it was. But how did people even hear them? It wasn't radio, right?
No, this was pure street level. Their fame came entirely from these underground things called hype tapes, basically live recordings of their party sets on cassette tapes. And they'd sell them at places like the Oakland Park Flea Market. Imagine that scene. Hot, crowded flea market. And you're buying this raw cassette tape that's got the sound everyone's talking about. Sources say people literally paid their rent selling these tapes. That's, undeniable street cred right there.
And there's this other layer the sources bring up, a social thing. Apparently, being a DJ was like having a passport.
Yeah, it's mentioned as a pass because back then, there were serious turf rivalries, between different neighborhoods, different crews like Royal Palm, Dixie Playboys. Being a Jam Pony DJ, that was often the only way someone could move safely between those zones. The music, the party scene, they kind of transcended the local beefs, built a community around the sound system.
Okay, so they had the sound, the style, the street influence, the community impact. Why aren't they household names? Why is their legacy still kind of underground?
Well, this gets back to that core tension. The sources frame it perfectly. They were street pioneers, not industry players. They built the foundation, but they never, filed the architectural plans, legally speaking.
Meaning they didn't handle the business side? What specifically did they miss? For someone listening, thinking about protecting their own creation.
Oh, it was critical stuff. They didn't formally set up Jam Pony Records as a proper protected business entity. Big one. They didn't trademark their name or even that iconic air tag early on. Imagine that. And crucially, they didn't secure the masters, the original recordings. Without those, you don't get royalties down the line. They didn't have lawyers, didn't sort out publishing splits. So yeah, massive influence, but because that whole IP structure was missing, it just didn't translate into lasting commercial success or even easily verifiable history. It kind of evaporated business-wise.
Which leads us perfectly down south to Miami and the rise of Luther Campbell, Uncle Luke. He starts as a promoter, a DJ himself, and the sources say he was watching very closely.
Extremely closely. He was a really sharp observer of what moves crowds in the Miami clubs, like the Pac Jam. He saw how people went nuts, not just for that deep, rumbling bass the sound Jam Pony pioneered up north, but also for that hype energy, that party mic style.
He put those pieces together, and then he makes a key move, right? Bringing in talent from outside Florida.
Exactly. He connects with Mr. Mix's group, Two Live Crew, who were actually originally from California. Luke brings them to Miami around '85. And that combination mixes production skills, Luke's promotional genius, and understanding of the Miami market that was the spark.
And then comes the explosion. 1986, Throw the D. That track didn't just ride the wave, it kind of defined the wave nationally. It became the blueprint for Miami-based production, obviously paired with the explicit lyrics Luke and Two Live Crew became infamous for later, but the sound was locked in.
And this is where regional rivalry really heats up. Sources are pretty clear. It was less about personal beefs and more geographical. Miami versus Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. The Broward crews, like Jam Pony, they absolutely felt like Miami acts, especially Luke, basically took their sound, their style, and ran with it without giving proper credit or, crucially, compensation. The feeling was, hey, we built this house, and you guys are living in it and telling everyone you designed it.
But you can't deny the business machine that got built in Miami was incredibly effective. Independent labels like Pandisco Crane started that back in 1980, and Joey Boy Records. They were the engine room.
They were smart, really smart. They saw a gap because the major labels wouldn't touch this stuff. Too raw, too regional, maybe too controversial. So these indie labels focused hard on the 12-inch vinyl single. That's what DJs needed. And they ran their pressing plants non-stop, 24/7, just churning out bass records that provided the distribution, the manufacturing, the structure that the street pioneers in Broward maybe needed but didn't have access to. They cornered the market fast.
Okay, but that success, it often didn't trickle down to the artists themselves, did it? This raises that uncomfortable question about exploitation. Was it predatory, or was it just artists not understanding the deals?
Well, the sources suggest it was really a mix of things that unfortunately led to a lot of artists getting the short end of the stick. Think about it. The indies had all the power because majors weren't interested. So artists felt like they had no choice. Combine that with, maybe a lack of good legal advice, artists not fully understanding publishing rights, royalty splits. It created a situation ripe for exploitation. I mean, the sources mentioned artists getting royalty checks for like $35 for records that were selling like crazy locally. The structure definitely favored the label, often heavily.
Wow. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about where this sound went after its peak in South Florida. The legacy, the lasting vibration, it didn't just stay there.
No way. That core DNA, the heavy 808, the tempo, the energy, it proved incredibly adaptable. Later, Florida artists like Trick Daddy, JT Money, they took that sound and kind of slowed it down, made it heavier, grimier. And if you listen to a lot of modern trap, like Young Thug, Gucci Mane, 21 Savage, even Kodak Black, who's from Florida, you are hearing the direct descendants of that slowed down, super heavy Florida bass sound. The 808 rhythm just keeps evolving.
And you absolutely have to mention Atlanta, right? The crunk era.
Oh, absolutely essential connection. Crunk music, which blew up in the early 2000s out of Atlanta, that's widely seen as being directly sparked by Miami bass. It took that same core 808 energy, the call and response hype, and just tweaked the tempo, usually a bit slower. But the lineage is undeniable. It basically birthed another huge subgenre.
And it even went international.
It did. The sound traveled. Sources point to a heavy influence on funky bass music in Brazil, sometimes called funk carioca. It shows how a sound cooked up in, Fort Lauderdale and Miami garages and clubs could spark a whole different cultural movement continents away.
Amazing. So if we bring this all back home, connected to that initial question about influence versus credit, the picture seems clearer, but still complex.
Yeah, it really solidifies into a two-act story, doesn't it? Act 1, Jam Pony Express. Early 80s, Fort Lauderdale. They create the authentic sound, the street buzz, the aesthetic. Pure, raw influence. Act 2, Luke, 2 Live Crew, the Miami labels. Mid-80s. They provide the commercial engine, the national platform, the structure flaws, and all that defines the genre for the world. Commercial success.
You really can't tell the full story of South Florida bass without both halves. They're both essential, just in different ways.
Exactly. One laid the foundation, the other built the skyscraper on top of it.
Right. So the key takeaways for you listening. That Roland 808, specifically cranking the decay knob for that rumble, that was the absolute sonic core. The original style, the hype, the street cred that started north in Fort Lauderdale with crews like Jam Pony Express. But the commercial explosion, the national recognition, the label infrastructure, that was undeniably engineered out of Miami, even if it came with some serious issues around credit and compensation.
And remember, that ground shaking sound, the one that defined bass, it came from literally turning up the rumble on a machine, physically manipulating it to make cars shake. So thinking about how that raw physical vibration built a whole global culture and industry makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
What other wah sounds are vibrating out there right now, maybe in garages or underground scenes, that have that same kind of visceral power, that huge potential influence, but maybe they lack the structure, the lawyers, the trademarks, the business plan. What's the next sound waiting to be either properly credited or commercially captured?
Something to definitely think